What's going on, guys? Check here, one of their awesome Blu-ray purchase. And this one is something I got new from the MVD Rewind collection. Now, this is kind of a little different as it's not actually a movie. Instead, it's a documentary. But I think it's very fitting to be put as part of the Rewind collection. And that is 1982, the greatest geek year ever. This is a documentary, as it says, about 1982. Primarily, it's just talking about the movies of 1982, and I think it's pretty much general consensus. I think from a lot of people, movie lovers, or geek culture, whatever you want to call it, that would say 1982 is known as a very good year for film. Specifically, I think people say for the genre film or geek film, but in general, and actually, that would have been my consensus too, until watching this and realizing there were just a lot of good movies that came out across the board in 1982, not just in the sci-fi, horror, fantasy genre, but in far as comedy, action, drama, a little bit of everything. And this documentary does a good job of spotlighting all those. Now, I don't know the history of this. From what I gather, this was like a one of those Indigo kind of things, crowdfunding type deals. I actually just kind of found out about it. I can't remember if it was on Amazon or maybe Blu-ray.com to pre-order. And I saw it. Well, that's really cool. It's MVD. I love documentaries talking about film, especially when you're getting into nostalgia, something like the 80s. And so I jumped at it right away. And it just arrived. So, like I said, it's just a talking head documentary. If you are a fan of In Search of Darkness, In Search of Tomorrow, this is basically along those lines. It goes about almost 3 hours long. It's like 2 hours and 40 plus minutes, almost like 2 hours 45 minutes. So it's not quite In Search of Darkness levels, but it's pretty lean. But it's not a slow movie. It's a much like I said with In Search of Darkness, where I watched those, like 3, 4, or 5 hours long, but they fly by like that. This is the same thing. It's very enjoyable, especially if you're like myself, who was a child, of this time, and you remember it fondly. Nostalgia really kicks in, and it's it really just it sucks you in. And what's nice about this, like with In Search of Darkness, where you're dealing with a whole decade on that, so it's you get 1 year, you get a couple films, same thing with In Search of Tomorrow. So you're just kind of dipping your toes into these individual years. Even with In Search of Darkness having 3 parts, about to be a 4th with the 90s coming up, it's still just a couple films per year. We're focusing on 1 year here, so we get all like I said, almost 3 hours worth of talking about different films. And they don't go on in detail about every film. Some are just kind of mentioned real quick, or or just briefly referenced. But there's a lot they will go into. Now, there's the obvious. They're going to talk about Poltergeist, E.T., Blade Runner. It'll hit me here in a minute. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is when they really get into some of the makings behind those. Those are all the obvious ones. Some of the obvious ones. But they'll also get into things like First Blood, Rocky III, 48 Hours, Tootsie, The Toy. My God, what else? Oh my God, Night Shift. With Michael Keaton and Henry Winkler. Talk about that. Talk about Friday the 13th Part 3. A couple slasher films. Not getting too much because obviously that's been covered to death. But they'll talk about some of those movies, particularly that year. But they also will get into stuff like Missing, Gandhi, The Verdict. Just my favorite year. The Year of Living Dangerously. So it's a wide range, and they're really talking about a lot of this stuff. A Firefox with Clint Eastwood. Who remembers that movie? The Dark Crystal is another one. So, I said it's a real wide range of all these great films that came out in this year. For me, it really, watching this, really brought back a lot of nostalgia for myself, because if I haven't, I'm sure I've said this before. You know, I grew up as a kid of the movies. You know, in 1982, I was still in Michigan. I would have been, oh, what, like, give me a minute, do the math here. uh, like seven going on 8. 7 years old, actually. Yeah, March of '82, I turned 7. But you know, I was going to the movies all the time, and it really didn't dawn until watching these. It's like, oh, so many movies that I went to the theater and saw. I mean, besides the obvious ones. Like I said, growing up as just with a single parent, my mom, who didn't drive anywhere at the time. She didn't get a license until she was probably in her 60s, 50s or 60s. Excuse me. It was just me and her in Michigan, and we were fortunate enough to have a movie theater like a block or two away from the house where we live. So, like every Friday or Saturday, pretty much every Friday night, we would go to the movies. And there's a little small one-screen theater. I don't remember. I think she told me like tickets were like $1 back then. Now, again, the memory is sketchy, so I'm pretty sure this is probably like a second-run theater. By the from the description of it being one screen, dollar tickets. This reminds you of the dollar movies I used to go to as a teenager. But this was something we did every week. That's every Friday, and the movies come out. And I saw so many of these classic films that were on here in that theater, and it just really took me back to that time. And I was like, wow, what a great time to be alive, to see these movies and experience them for the first time up on that big screen. And there's a lot of nostalgia in here talking about how at that time you had movies that were not all about intellectual property like so much is now. Something's based off, a franchise, a video game, a novel, something, or some kind of intellectual property you're making a movie about. It's very, very rare you're going to have weird ideas, originality thrown out there like you would, I mentioned like Tron was such a weird concept, which you wouldn't think to do. It was out of your mind, but someone, Disney went in and did it. Now they're trying to make a franchise of that. Some other, they talk about Porky's, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The stuff, dealing with these kids with, in high school, that kind of stuff you wouldn't really deal with now because it'd be too taboo and too, we don't want to, I don't know, frighten away our audience, whatever. But no one takes chances now. Basics of the point they're making, which I think is a very valid point. They will also talk about stuff like the rise of Siskel and Ebert, just Mega Force is only talking about how the movie that would the comparison of how of GI Joe and that's actually in deleted scenes, but just I'm so many movies you mentioned, but were weird off the wall things that they wouldn't really attempt now. They'll also go into sword and sorcery stuff, like Conan, Beastmaster, Sword and Sorcerer, the Dungeons and Dragons phenomena, or of that time. But they had all kinds of things, so it's really cool. Again, it's just a great nostalgia trip, and again, just talking about all of this great, all these great pieces of pop culture, stuff we remember now, some 42 years later, which is just blowing my mind to think about that. But it's still relevant. You still remember it. It's still a piece of you, and that's such a cool thing. And it's really fun to go through it and watch. Like I said, this is a very fun watch. I'm really excited that MVD did this. So let's take a look at this Blu-ray. It is a strictly Blu-ray. It is a region-free Blu-ray. So here's your front. And a lot of it kind of reminds me of, In Search of Darkness along a lot of ways. Not fancy graphics, but some of it just kind of sticks out. Here's your back. It's got some nice special features on here as well. We'll get in that in a minute. So here's the slipcover. And there's the actual Blu-ray. Same things. Inside, you've got, much like their Rewind collection, you have the Blu-ray here, which kind of, if you can see it, kind of has, it's basically a VHS tape. That kind of, you see the design there. And pop this out. Here's the back reverse cover, which is nice. I guess you could probably flip that around if you wanted to. And it does, again, much like every other MVD release, you get a nice mini poster and just of the cover, which is still cool. Like I said, I mean, this is just a very nice, very fun look back on a fantastic year in film. Again, not just the typical genre stuff, but just film in general, and it's a great look back at a wonderful, wonderful year. What's also fun, you go through the credits at the very end, it does say that they will return with 1984 versus the World Crime League. Was it the greatest geek year ever? 2 TOO. So hopefully we will see the sequel of 1984, because I think I do remember a lot of good movies that year as well, along with 89. 89 was a big one, so maybe they'll do, maybe it's a trilogy, I don't know. But I know they didn't say it. I don't know whether it was a joke or not. I don't think it was, but we'll see. Like I said, I didn't hear much about this. I didn't hear anything about it, actually. I just kind of just saw the blurb on either, or again, Amazon or Blu-ray.com. I can't remember which one. And, you know, that made me jump at it right away. And I'm so glad I did. So let's take a look at the special features on here. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Of course, this is a high definition 1080p presentation of the main feature in 1781 aspect ratio. Again, strictly Blu-ray, obviously. You have an English 5.1 surround with English subtitles. You have audio commentary with director-producer Roger Lee Jr. and writer-producer Mark A. Altman. An audio commentary with producers Scott Mantz, Thomas B. Vitale, and Mark A. Altman. And you have deleted and extended scenes, which these go about, actually it says right here, 40 minutes, 49 seconds, which is interesting. Again, they're just extended interviews. Some are deleted, some are just extended out. But one thing I'm going to warn you about, they are not properly, obviously edited. So the sound will jump in and out, and some are really low, some will get blast at you, so they're not mixed properly because they are deleted scenes. So that was kind of threw me a bit, but they're still interesting to watch. The Fans Speak, fan favorite film featurette, which is about 16 minutes, 51 seconds. This is, I'm assuming, again, with your backers. These are people who paid extra to film their little video clips of their memories of films or that period, which is interesting. The 2022 San Diego Comic-Con panel, 28 minutes, 19 seconds. I have not watched this yet. There's a trailer, double-sided artwork, and collectible mini posters. There's also some movie trailers on here as well for some of the films they mentioned. Not a whole lot. I think it's probably like a small handful, but those are on there as well. So yeah, there it is. 1982, the greatest geek year ever. From MVD, part of the Rewind collection. If you are nostalgic like I am of 1982, if you lived 1982, if you remember that time period, or if you're just a lover of history of film, I definitely highly recommend this. It's a fun watch. I put it right up there with something like the In Search Of series. Obviously a more condensed version, but you're focusing on 1 year, so you get a lot more films of that year. And again, it's across all kinds of genres, not just focusing on one thing. So it's really, eye-opening. And again, just a great look back. So that is it for this one. If you enjoyed it, just click thumbs up, share, subscribe, leave me a comment below. Let me know if you picked this up. Let me know if you have memories of 1982. Like I said, I was 7 years old, but I know, like I said, that I was, my love of film was really developing. Actually, let me take it back. My love of movies was developing at that point, and it was a very impressionable time for me. And I am so grateful that I came up at that time to see so many great movies in the theater when they first came out, and to have these wonderful memories. So let me know if you have something similar like that, or just say hi. I'll always take hi. So until next time, this is Chuck saying I will see you on the other side.